Thank you very much, Dato Tim, for your very gracious and kind exaggerations about me. I have much to be thankful for to Dato Tim, and especially for this most recent experience of now, for the first time and probably the last time of my life, feeling what it's like to be a rock star, to have this gadget attached to your head. I see this only in the singers on MTV. Thank you for that experience, Dato Tim. Like many of us here today, I recall vividly my first ASEAN 100 experience. It was 2004 in Singapore. Like many of us, I have been a long time and regular participant, though I like to think co-conspirator of ASEAN 100. Like many of us, I have learned much and have benefited from ASEAN 100's mind-broadening exposure, its nurturing and fermenting of ideas, and most of all, the many friendships I have made. Thank you, Dato Tim, as well as to your team, for your commitment and hard work. A round of applause, please, for Dato Tim. Also, like many of you, I have traveled along many roads in the 8 years since ASEAN 100 was started. For some, they are today exactly where they had fully intended to be. For others, myself included, perhaps we had planned to be elsewhere or here in other capacities, meaning things are not as we had planned. Perhaps a change in travel agents is in order. Whatever the circumstances, we are here now at this time and place, and I am happy to be with you. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen of the ASEAN 100, good morning. Amidst the floods and destruction of the recent Typhoon Pedring and our nervous anticipation for Typhoon number 17 for 2011, Kiel, international name Naljae, and by the way, there are 5 more expected before the typhoon season ends. I extend a warm welcome to you all. I am grateful for your expressions of concern and support. You have always all been great friends of my country. Even more so, I am grateful for the time and interest you took in making the trip to my country. It gives us a chance to renew old ties, make new friends, and show you what we've made of ourselves and why we are so full of enthusiasm. We are gathered here in the Philippines at a period of great enthusiasm and opportunity. Last year, our political system crossed a historic milestone, transforming itself from a government for a few to a government of the people. Gone are the days when the government itself shackled freedom, zealously guarded the status quo, and maintained the privilege of only a few. This is best described by what is known locally as the Wang Wang syndrome. Wang Wang refers to the blaring sirens abused by the rich and privileged in power to make their way through traffic. Unauthorized and illegal as it was, they nonetheless Wang Wanged, yes, it became a verb, they nonetheless Wang Wanged their way about. This reflected accurately the way they looked at themselves, their positions, relative to the people. The rules applied to everyone else. As they scornfully disregarded everyone else's interest but their own, and contemptuously intimidated and pushed aside commuters and pedestrians, they likewise brazenly and unreservedly saw the people's money as their own and spent it as such. This is no longer the case. For a while, it became such that the management acronym SOP, Standard Operating Procedure, became an acronym for graft. To get anything done in the Philippines, the SOP became an SOP. This resulted in a people inured to the creeping normalcy of corrupt and mediocre government. It came to a point that the default outcome was commonplace graft and the impunity in which it thrived. Indeed, it became the kalakaran, or the way things are. All that changed in May of 2010, and how it's changed. Open governance is very much in effect, with transparency, the empowerment of the people, and the fight against corruption taking the lead. The new government adheres to what we call in Filipino as the tuwid na daan, or taking the righteous and straight path. And the other most important value of kayo ang boss, referring to the people as the primordial interest and the focal point for all government action. The 2010 national elections last year presaged all the hopeful signs that change was imminent. The choice was clear between the abstract ideal, the high-minded what could be, versus the banal pragmatism, the vulgarity of more of the same. The battle was between the determined what ought to be versus the self-defeating pandering to the least common denominator. Our people made a choice. They roundly rejected the easier and familiar route of traditional politics, of the handout, the mutual back-scratching, and patronage-driven government. The Filipino people chose the harder journey of the straight and narrow path, the tuwid na daan. It's been 15 months since the new government assumed office. To put it in another perspective, there are still 4 years and 9 months more to go to make the promise real. Much has already been done, but our need to do more is relentless. We are moving to an inclusive society where the fruits of economic growth are not the preserve of a select few, but the rightful claim of the many. There are self-interested special interests accustomed to the old ways that are threatened by this, and they are mightily struggling to preserve the ways of the old. But we are determined to succeed and to make our mark and transform our country. We believe that good governance begets a sound economy. Good governance plus a sound economy equals a decent and dignified life for our people. Many of you, my friends, have been and are long-time and perhaps frustrated watchers of the Philippines. The question in your mind is, why will it be different this time? Will this euphoria of possibility and opportunity last and convert itself into institutionalized and real transformative change? I am reminded of an old Russian proverb that seems so fittingly applicable to my country. To paraphrase, it has been said, the Philippines never misses a chance to miss a chance. Will we miss this chance? I believe not. This time, it is different. To begin with, things indeed already are very different, in a transformed way and irreversibly so. Let's look at a few snapshots comparing us now and 25 years ago, 1985-86, a generation's worth of time when this same feeling of optimistic ferment was also upon us. 25 years ago, when Marcos had just fled the country, the Philippines was bankrupt. There was no foreign exchange, and we didn't know if we could buy the oil, medicines, and other essentials that we imported. A decade ago, when I first became Trade and Industry Secretary, every month the economic team would nervously watch the international reserve count to see whether we had crossed the safe zone of $3 billion. I note in the audience former Finance Secretary Ramon del Rosario, so he is very, very familiar with this. He shared many of those evenings hoping and praying that enough reserves would come in. Today, we have $75 billion in gross international reserves, and our continuing challenge is how to recycle into the economy the steady stream of about $18 billion annually that comes in. The specter of a foreign exchange crisis in the Philippines is gone for good. 25 years ago, the country's finances were in shambles, and the threat of a fiscal crisis was always imminent. Steady improvements, most especially in the last year, have resulted in our being fully in control over our fiscal situation. We are successfully on track with our budget deficit targets, and due to a number of favorable developments, likely will come in this year under the deficit projection for the year. The full-year deficit number is supposed to be 300 billion pesos. Presently, as of August, we are only at about 30 billion pesos. As an example, we are benefiting from about 30 billion pesos of reduced interest charges because of credit upgrades and better credit terms. The government has attained several upward notches from the rating agencies, and the spreads have narrowed significantly. In fact, the current criticism levied against the fiscal program is for the so-called underspending. For the Philippines, with its history of profligate and corrupt spending, that is marked improvement indeed. Let's just call it prudent and deliberate spending. 25 years ago, the people couldn't talk with each other. For a country of about 70 million, there were only some 800,000 telephone connections. The Venerable Lee Kuan Yew, in a visit to the country, described it as most of the country was waiting for a telephone line, with the balance waiting for a dial tone. Today, we are 95 million people, and there are some 80 million telco subscribers. Think about that. And if that were not startling enough, consider that these subscribers exchange some 2 billion text messages every single day. I also note in the audience the presence of Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala, one of the pioneers who put his money where his mouth was and took a risk and invested in the telco infrastructure for the country. Thank you very much for that, Jaime. With all those text messages, he should be one of the corporate partners for next year and thereafter, Timothy? 25 years ago, we had one airline with expensive fares, limited destinations, and terrible service. This year, we will have nearly 30 million passengers, or roughly 100,000 a day. This has created lots of jobs and incomes in the countryside, and it has further integrated our domestic economy and rendered it much more resilient than before. The last snapshot I want to show you is the one on our overseas Filipino workers, our OFWs. The latest estimate is that we have some 10 million Filipinos abroad. Yes, this has been a double-edged sword for us. We have social problems arising from this. And yes, we benefit greatly from the remittances they send back. But one thing is indisputable. The transformative change wrought by this diaspora is that there is now this whole segment in our population that, for better or worse, has experienced what it is like in other countries. From experiencing a modern airport, to working with modern equipment, or being exposed to different cultures, it is inevitable that the world's best practices will seep its way back into the country. Certainly, this exposure to the world will result in higher expectations and standards of what and how government should behave and deliver. So indeed, even if only because of these physical changes, the country is transformed and changed in positive ways, though in many instances, still incalculable. But let me bring your attention to what, in my mind, is the most important reason why the change and reform are here to stay. Benigno Aquino, Pinoy to his countrymen. He has been described by Time magazine as one who carries himself with an air of almost Gandhian simplicity and uprightness. You can judge for yourself later on this evening as he will be joining you for dinner. By age, Pinoy is of our generation. He shares our endless wonder to discover the world and the honesty and practicality by which we approach our lives. The coming of a popular leader of simplicity and uprightness has already reawakened our country from the seeming coma of the past. Any leader who follows a straight path and treats the people as his boss with deep respect cannot but harvest the support of the people and with it the growing strength of the nation. The struggle is far from won, but it is being fiercely fought daily. Filipinos have the willingness to take the short-term pain for the long-term gain. Their patience is best seen in the single-mindedness by which they have bestowed their trust in the national leadership. The President's high trust ratings, 70 to 75%, more than a year into the administration, have held steady and even now are at an upward trend. I feel the people are with him and with all of us in this battle for the long haul. We are not simply attacking an anomalous project here or changing a program there. Our objective is to make the straight and narrow the default destiny for the Philippines. The straight and narrow will be the way things are, the new kalakaran. The big change is in the psyche, the change in mindset that will ensure that whatever reforms are undertaken today will not be uprooted and corrupted by some other future government. And the reason why we will succeed is because we are making these reforms in actuality, not just in slogans and speeches. The people are seeing and feeling that through good government, indeed their lives are improved and their prospects are brightened. Indeed, transforming our people's expectations of what their government and leaders are supposed to do and how they are supposed to behave is how this battle will be won. An anecdote from several business leaders that I've come across in this last year and a half illustrates it best. They tell me, quite candidly, you know, the government need not do much. It has already done so much in the single act of not having Malacanang, which is the President's office, have his hand out for whatever corruption there may be. That is the single biggest transformative change in our country today. And if that becomes the default destiny, the default reality in the Philippines, that will reverberate all through the economy with its attendant beneficial impact. The government has adopted zero-based budgeting to evaluate the effectiveness of government programs. Effective programs get increased funding, while programs that are not delivering desired results are eliminated and every expenditure is itemized. These are part of our leaders' 5 R's standard for undertaking any spending of the people's money. The right project, the right quality, with the right people, at the right cost, and right on time. There is now a respected ombudsman who will prosecute graft and corruption cases. We are now letting the sunlight in on official contracts and transactions. Blind justice is being restored, and many people are regaining the self-esteem that can only come from a revitalization of the rule of law and growing respect from abroad. We are making steady progress, and it is becoming noticeable. For one, the latest World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Index ranking has the Philippines rising 10 spots from number 85 last year to number 75 out of 142 economies this year. It's good improvement, but certainly we will not rest on this. The Philippines is also just recently on the steering committee of the Open Government Partnership. This is a new initiative chaired by the United States and Brazil and joined in on by already some 35 countries. The partnership aims to secure commitments from governments to promote transparency, the empowerment of the citizenry, the fight against corruption, and the harnessing of new technologies to strengthen governance. And last night, I just stepped off the plane from Japan where I traveled with the President, which was the last leg of a three-nation series, first to China, then the United States, over the last month. I can report to you that the three nations visited consider President Aquino a key partner in fair trade and investment, in good governance, and in regional security. With the simplicity and uprightness of a new leader, we are reconnecting government and the people. The changes that are happening are no passing flutter. This is seismic change. This is movement of the continental plates, at least as far as the Philippines is concerned. We are fostering a stable policy environment that allows capital to work its magic, creating jobs, incomes and livelihood, and a better life for our people. Big changes are already happening, but it will be a long road ahead. Skepticism among some sectors is strong, and the leadership has to navigate through difficult terrain with extreme pressures and many voices, especially where the press is as free as it should be and where institutions constitute a system of checks and balances to the exercise of power. But I am confident that the Philippines can be resurgent on the back of the people's faith in President Pinoy, his consistent pursuit of good governance, the hard work of Filipinos here and abroad, and the goodwill and support of allies like you. This nation will change if there is a change from the top. Our politics always places emphasis on the values exemplified by the leader. If he follows the straight path, the people will follow. As for me, I have joined government in order to put my oar in the water and to help where I can. Like my people, I am in this battle for the long haul. And like you, I believe in moving the continental plates, not merely moving the playing field. I have faith in the Filipino. I believe the Filipino has the courage and the commitment to do the right thing. I believe the Filipino can compete with the best in the world. I believe that the Filipino can rise above himself, inspired as he is by a trustworthy leader. Some will say this is naive idealism. I say this is a fair assessment of our foreseeable future. But all this will come through faster with the goodwill and support of friends like you in the ASEAN 100. I shall always cherish your friendship, not only for me, but for my country and people. Thank you and good morning.